We have different preferences as people. It could be shaped by our upbringing, it could be shaped by societal measures. But I've noticed men and their preferences receive backlash or receive pushback. And I'm obviously going to mention from who, and it's mainly women. I've noticed, for example, let's just say you have a man, a decent person, a decent individual. He's aware, he has awareness of societal norms and perceptions, but he comes across well. Delivery, speaks well, just is a decent person, right? In how he comes across. And they could be asked, or he could be asked his preference, and he could state exactly what he's meaning about why he's saying what he's saying. And it can literally just be based on what he likes. And a lot of the time, what that person likes, like I said, can be shaped by upbringing and societal measures. But this person, let's just say they speak from a perspective of what they like based on what they've experienced. And normally, I've noticed pushback takes place. I want to speak specifically about black men, right? Because I've grown up around, for example, a particular part of London, and it was around black people. And I've noticed with our preferences, and especially if I, again, preface it with the fact that let's just say it's a person who is decent, comes across well, comes across aware. You ask him his preference, a woman may ask him his preference, and I've seen this, it gets pushed back based on the fact that how he may describe what he likes from a physical standpoint, right? He may describe it clearly, he may assess and state why he likes it, or may just have a preference that is not on the surface rooted in any form of ignorance. So he states what he states, but he receives pushback. For example, I saw a Pop the Balloon episode. The main Pop the Balloon. If you know, the main one. There's a bunch of them out there, but there's the main one that really gets an audience, right? And there was a person on there, a black guy that was on there, and he mentioned his preference based on when he was asked what his preference was and why he didn't want a particular lady in the, one of the contestants. And then there was another lady who was in the line, who mentioned the fact that she didn't want this person speaking, the man speaking about hair. Because this person, the man, he said something about the fact of him wanting a particular hairstyle in a woman that he would want. And this one in the line didn't have it. So he just basically stated, the hair wasn't, something to his liking in terms of maybe how the design was. And I think that's what it was generally about. He didn't mention anything about race, anything about texture, length. He just generally mentioned about, a style of hair he didn't, particularly find appealing to him only. And then, like I say, the other contestant, when it was her turn to speak, mentioned and wasn't too happy about him mentioning hair. And I thought to myself, okay, preferences, it's all individualistic. Everyone has an individual their own preference, but I didn't understand this particular one and why it was an issue based on what he said, because what he said wasn't rooted, like I said, in any other reason that can be perceived from a general sense as ignorant. It was more about him just stating physical aspects, which you could say, we all have physical aspects that, we like and what we want, or what we would want. And yeah, I noticed that aspect on that show. So I thought to myself, a few aspects as to what do men have to do. And let me again make another clarity point about the type of man. Now, if you get a man who's just ignorant, rude, says what he doesn't like, and is rude about it, I'm not talking about that kind of person. Those are the ones that get pushed back. And okay, fine, they get pushed back. You can understand it. But it seems the persons or the men, and this is not just from a black man perspective, this is just man perspective, but if it's the men who are respectful and explain exactly what it is they want and don't want, and why they don't want it, they get pushed back and they get lumped into the men who maybe are rude, ignorant in how they explain their preferences, and they get lumped into receiving pushback as well, and they get put in the same category. But I've never understood that perspective, because of the fact that if a man or a person is being honest, respectful as much as that person can, why is there pushback? I don't understand that part, you know. So I thought to myself, is there a distinguishing, you know, point to be had between the two types of individuals that could, you know, pose their preferences? Are we going to separate the ones who are not rooted in ignorance, not rooted in any kind of disrespect, but just literally rooted in their experiences? You know, as long as their experiences are not negative, if they have fond experiences with certain types of women who maybe look a certain way, it doesn't mean they don't have maybe a potential to have good experiences with some other women. It just means that this is what they've liked based on their experience. Why can't we distinguish between those kind of men who have that experience and then the ones who just nullify certain women, or let's just say black women, based on negative stereotypes? Like, they just categorize women based on negative stereotypes, which, if obviously they get pushback, you can understand that. But why is there kind of like a lumping in thing? Because men who come across well should be able to say what they have to say about what they want. So that's one thing I thought of. And also, do men have to state their preferences with the fact that they now have to maybe go in with a notion that somebody may have trauma? So now they have to potentially state preferences and hold back on how they speak on it, because someone may have a trauma experience or have something that they have a hang up on in terms of how they look, or in terms of what they appear like, or how their hair is, or whatever it is. Because again, the main aim here, and what I'm assessing, is not just about looking at people from an appearance standpoint. It's just saying when someone has a appearance preference, doesn't mean there's not other preferences from a human perspective that someone may want in someone. It's literally just about someone looking at a preference from a physical standpoint. Should a man now have to hold back and think, oh, I can't say what I really want because this person may have a traumatic experience, or may have trauma that they're holding on that, quite frankly, doesn't affect me, but it affects you, and now I have to go and maybe walk on eggshells? Should men have to do that? That's something that I thought of. Just throwing questions out there. Also, if they are doing that, is it true to them? Are men being themselves if they more or less appease? And are they being true to you? Are they having to state why they don't want something by lying to appear appeasing, and then maybe they don't receive any kind of pushback? You know, like, are we having preferences based on an approval from women, or are we having our preferences that we want, like how women are allowed to have their preferences, right? And these are some of observations that, you know, that I've come to, because women can easily say, I want my man looking medium ugly, I don't want my man too fine, or I've seen it, I've heard it, I've heard women say, he gotta look medium ugly, y'all. And it's like, okay, and I've heard it from a London perspective. He don't have to look too good. Like, as long as he's medium ugly, I'm good. And it's like, okay, we have to accept that as the men. And let's be fair, that don't make sense. That doesn't make sense. So these are things that I thought of, like, why is there an issue with men's perspectives if the men come across well, speak well, explain it well, and literally state it from a non-ignorant standpoint, especially on the surface of things? Like, from what they've presented on the surface, is coming across as non-ignorant, because you will never truly know unless you find out something about that person later on, that it turns out that in fact that person has been ignorant in the past, right? But just generally, someone stating their case, a man stating their case, and stating it from a perspective that They've dealt with certain people and this is what they like. Just like women who can say what they like in men. You know, these are things that I see a lot of the time. And I've just, again, taken things in, watched things and thought to myself, where is that sort of nuanced perspective? Because if someone is rude, if someone ain't, you know, coming across correctly in the way they speak and downing people from a physical or from any perspective without any basis, fine. Disregard that person. I'm not saying, you know, advocate for that. I'm talking about people, decent men who could be decent individuals, men of all sort of backgrounds. But I'm talking about, you know, black men from my perspective. And I've seen this and I've questioned it and I thought to myself, like I say, women, they can have their perspectives, but we have issue if we say what we want from our perspective, if also it's not said in a malicious way. And that's something that I thought. But I think for me, everyone is allowed to have preferences in a nutshell. I think everyone is allowed to, as long as it's not your main focus from a physical standpoint, as long as it's just something that, you know, you admire and you've got the right reasons why you admire a physical aspect of someone, then yeah, that's fine. You admire it. You like it. You because we're human. We're physical beings. We're visual. Both men and women are visual. But it's just something that I realized and noticed that generally over time, when men have a clear cut preference, it's frowned upon. And again, I'm distinguishing between men who are respectful and men who are not. The men who are, they still get pushback. The men who are not, they get pushback, and maybe rightly so, but then generally lumped together. And it's like a decent person who comes across decent is not allowed to say what their preference is, because as a man, I really don't really mind what most women think, you know, about what their preferences are. Because at the end of the day, it's all about, can you get what your preference is? Can you get it? Can you get what you want? And that's what that it really boils down to. So you can have all the preferences. It just depends, can you get what you want at the end of the day, you know? So just an observation. And I think, you know, men have to continually have their preferences rooted in things that actually make sense, though. And then women will continue to have their preferences as they do. But I just think that, and I question why, you know, do men have so much pushback? But I would say a lot of it is due to a lot of the times that pressure that maybe women put themselves under in terms of, you know, from a physical standpoint of what they believe they, you know, the pressure they're under from maybe society or the ideas that they hear from society that they take on. It doesn't mean you hear stuff from society and you have to take that on. It doesn't have to be, okay, society says something and you can look at the media or other, you know, outlets or whoever says it. You do not need to take on that to then further put pressure on yourself. And then obviously, which in turn can lead to, you know, untreated trauma. But I think it's something that I've always looked at and thought, yeah, irrespective of the reason as to, you know, why a woman may have a preference, they're allowed to. But it's important that we're fair on each side. You know, we're fair on each side and we allow people to have a preference. Again, making it clear and mindful that it's all about being non-ignorant and also being respectful for the most part, you know. But yeah, I'll be interested to find out what other people think about this, because yeah, it's a conversation that has been going on. People's preferences online, people's you know, discontent towards people's preferences, and yeah, it will be interesting to find out what other people think.